Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the final episode of Joseph Ryder Anderson podcast for 2025. In anticipation of the new year, I'm going to do something special, a little bit different than what I've done before. And that is to dive into questions from you, from the listeners, from the readers at josephryderanderson.com to the listeners of the Joseph Ryder Anderson podcast. I put out a request for Ask Me Anything. I forget when it was, but it was earlier in December. And I originally had planned only on doing this as a segment towards the end of more of a Joseph Ryder Anderson focused overview for 2025. But I ended up getting so many questions that I think it makes sense to just do an entire episode of the final episode for 2025 on answering your questions that you sent in. I'm going to try to answer all of them. And they were really good questions. I'm always blown away by the Union Arena community. I'm always blown away by how smart and thoughtful the people who play this game seriously and take this game seriously and take improving their skills in this game, how seriously they take that. So I think that the questions were really, really good questions. And they were largely, despite I opened this up to my whole website, and it was the Union Arena people who answered the most. So let's go ahead and dive into these questions, starting with, actually, before we get into that, let's go and talk about one thing, which there was some news. I always like to start these episodes with a little bit of news to update what's been happening in Union Arena. I think the biggest thing since the last episode we went over a bunch of news, but the biggest thing that's happened since then, verification and announcement that we will be getting, or at least Union Arena will be getting, for its first Volume 3 for Bleach. To me, although I don't typically always report on what goes on for the Asian version of Union Arena, to me, this is a clear sign that we are probably going to get a Volume 3 for Union Arena, for Bleach and Union Arena. It just seems too likely that that's going to happen. Bleach is a phenomenally popular show. We have a fourth and final season for 1,000 Year Blood War coming out next year. So it's a phenomenal time to have a card game come out for this. We've already had additional support for Bleach in the new binder collection, new Bleach new card selection that functions sort of as a soft Volume 3 for Bleach. And I think it's very likely that we're going to get this Volume 3 in the English version. And I think it's likely we're going to get it sooner rather than later. For anybody who's been doing Union Arena since the beginning, you might remember that after the success of the original Bleach set, Bandai seemingly bumped up the release date for Bleach. And it was the first Volume 2 we got in the English version of the game. And I think the Bleach Volume 3 will likely be the first Volume 3 in the English meta as well as the Japanese one. So I think that's really cool. I love Bleach. I can't wait to dive back into it yet again in 2026 for the final season. The Bleach Rukia Zero Cost character, I've already been looking around for shops that have that promo, because that's going to be such a powerful deck when it comes out. So that's the most exciting news that's come out for Union Arena. But that's not really what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about your questions. So many of you wrote in with your questions, and I'm really grateful for that. So thank you for filling out the form on the website or the other form that I sent around too. It was a little short notice, so I appreciate you taking the time to fill that out. So let's go ahead and dive in. We're going to start with the first question, which is an excellent question from Edgar. And Edgar asks, what is your thought process and strategy during a Union Arena game that leads to more victories? And that is a really good question. That's essentially what we all want to know, right? We all want to know, what can I do to improve my odds of winning? I think there's a lot of things. I think the first thing that I would say is that I've been focusing a lot on since the game's evolved. In the early days, there was only so much draw, for example, that you had. Unless if you were playing certain decks, like Bleach Purple always had a lot of draw, and blue Sakuna always had a lot of draw, but a lot of decks didn't. So things like building the perfect hand, that wasn't always a very big focus area for me, right? Like I played Goddesses for a long time, Yellow Goddesses, SEO Goddesses. I got really good at that deck. I think the best win streak I ever had to date was with Goddesses, where I won around 5 tournaments in a row playing Goddesses. And those were at different shops and in different formats. And think about a deck like Goddesses at the moment, and this is going to change when Volume 2 comes out, is that decks like that don't have a ton of filtering or draw. Draw or discard. Let's put it that way. Draw is easy. You don't have to think about draw. If you're just drawing a card, there's not a lot to think about there other than what you're going to do with the cards you have. You're always thinking that. But in terms of building the perfect hand, that's what I've been thinking about a lot lately, is how do I build the perfect hand? And with a deck like the one I'm playing right now, Yellow Mina, that comes up a lot. Because Yellow Mina from Kaiju 8 is a deck that has very different modes it can go into. So early on, it can go into this hyper aggro mode. And then later in the game, you can go into a much more of a control-focused mode where you're locking characters down, building up with impact, attacking from the energy line. You can do a lot of control-ish things, but it's hard to know which one of those modes to go into first. For me, I really want to hit the Reno first. If I can hit that Reno play as early as possible, where I'm raiding the Reno, preferably playing the Bako, pushing up another attacker, the odds of me losing a game where I get that play off on like turn 2, the odds of me losing that game are pretty slim. So I'm really looking for that, and I'm going to prioritize that over getting a Mina early on. So what does that mean? It means I'm not going to play the 1-cost Mina as much, right? I'm going to focus more on drawing. I'm going to focus on seeing cards. So I'm going to play the Soshiro, 0-cost Soshiro, draw 1, discard. I'm going to discard some of my bigger characters because I can't play them. I need 3 costs or less characters to get that free play off of the Reno. And I'm going to play the 1-cost Reno over the 1-cost Mina to try to draw into the Reno, right? Because if I play the Mina, the 1-cost Mina, it's just going to search for a Mina, not going to actually let me pull out a Reno. So that's something I've been working on. I think that you can take that to any deck. I'm using 2 specific decks as an example because that's what I've been playing a lot. But this also has a lot to do with another deck I've been playing, which is the Kenpachi Toshiro deck, for example. I've been playing it with originally I didn't play it with I forget his name. Oh, Shinji. The 1-cost Shinji, I didn't play it with the 1-cost Shinji. Now playing that 1-cost Shinji, I'm now playing it with it. I think that's the right thing to do. Playing that 1-cost Shinji all of a sudden gives you a lot more to think about. There's comboing it with your 2-cost, I forget his name, Kiraku. So if you play the Shinji and then you see 2 cards you like and you play the Kiraku, and they're not cards that you can pull with the Kiraku search, there's some sequencing there you have to think about, as well as with the Akaku, there's some draw and discard. So you can apply these rules to any deck, but I think that's really where I'm at right now, is figuring out how am I thinking several turns ahead with my opening hand. How am I thinking several turns ahead to build the hand I need then, and what is the play that I need to go after the most? And sometimes matchups factor into that, right? Like if I'm going against a red Kenshin, I really want to get the aggro play first if I can, so I'm going to prioritize the Reno. Versus if you're going up against something like the Kikaru, you might want to prioritize getting your board set up with Minas, because Mina is your big differentiator versus the Kikaru. So that's what I've been thinking about a lot. It's just how to build that perfect hand. There's other things too that I think about. For example, I think a lot of people tend to. One thing a tendency I've seen with players is to worry a lot about the opponent's game. And I've seen people do this to their detriment, where they worry so much about their opponent's win conditions that they forget to just play the game. So that's one thing that I do regularly, is I just go for the optimal play. I go for the strongest play, and I don't do my opponent's work for them. I don't try to anticipate every little thing they're going to do. Any given deck has things you want to look out for, just to be cautious. But I'm not gonna forsake a brilliant play just because my opponent might have a better play when I don't know that they have that play. You don't ever know, right? I think a good example of this, I was playing at a local. I hadn't played it in a bit because of the holidays, and I was playing my first game at a locals, and I had a brilliant play. I was playing Kenpachi Toshiro, and I had a brilliant play to be really aggressive into a Saito deck and hit basically make it so they couldn't block me, swing for damage 2 with a Kenpachi that was rated over 4 cost and other attackers, and just really hit for a lot of damage to bring my opponent down to 2 life. And in the process of doing that, my opponent's board was really not built up at all. The odds in my head, I was like, the odds of them having anything really to come back from this, like I'm gonna cripple them while I can, and then I'll figure it out from there. And I didn't end up winning that game because I hit a special out of life, and then my opponent hit 2 Saitos. I think I gave him one of them, and that was just too much removal for me to come back from. But I don't regret doing that because it was the strongest play at that time, and it could easily have worked out. It was a risk, but it could easily have worked out. If they hadn't gotten the special or the second Saito, any one of those things not getting it, I could still have won. So those are the kinds of things I think about when I'm playing, really. But yeah, great question, Edgar. Moving on to the next question. Martin asks, what goes into a good Union Arena deck? And how do you find the perfect balance between cards? So to answer that first question, my view of this has evolved a lot over time. And when it really kicked in for me, when I really got a much higher, like a much better view of what a good Union Arena deck looks like, it's changed a bit, right? Like back in the day, Code Geass Purple was the strongest deck because it could remove 4Ks the most consistently. But as time has gone by, I've come to realize it's not all about removal. Really, to me, the low-cost characters and what your low-cost characters can do matters just about as much as what your strongest characters can do. So like that's something that, again, to go back to the Goddesses deck, that's something that I found when I took Goddesses to the regional in LA. Playing it locally, I could win. I could still win tournaments at that point, months after Goddesses first came out, when it was really starting to age. I could still take it to a locals and win because I'm a good player and I know how that deck works. But when you go to the next level at a regional, all of a sudden the differences between what your deck can do and what the cutting edge Kenshin deck can do, you notice it a lot more, right? And like a Saito has so much low cost draw and filter versus a deck like Goddesses that has virtually none. Like Goddesses isn't drawing anything until you get to your 3 cost character. So having that experience made me respect the low cost characters a lot more. I think a really stark example of this lately has been how much the Kenpachi Toshiro deck changed just from getting a couple of low-cost cards. Like, Kenpachi Toshiro didn't get a new powerful attacker or some new game-closing strategy like a Malevolent Shrine, but for Kenpachi. Kenpachi got so much better and became S tier and dominated the latest regional because Kenpachi got a 1-cost filter character, a 2-cost search character, and a 3-cost draw character. And then it also got, as overkill, it got that Kenpachi that counts as a 4-cost on the field, but a 3-cost in your hand and can also attack for 4K. That card's so broken. It didn't even need that and it got it, right? So another thing too is those 2 energy characters. That Kenpachi, that 2 energy gen Kenpachi that's also a raid target, that's another huge thing. Raid decks need to have raid targets with 2 energy gen. It just makes it so much more economical to get that raid off. So if you have a deck that has really strong raid characters, for example, like Goddesses has really strong raid characters, but it doesn't have the low end support it needs to see the cards you need, then you're going to much more likely fall behind. You're much more reliant on getting that perfect hand from the start. Whereas if you have a bunch of zero drop, one drop, draw one, discard one, search and filter, etc., at that low end, you're getting way more value out of that, and you're building that perfect hand. So I guess get back down to building that perfect hand over time throughout the game. Like, what cards are you going to discard? What cards are you going to keep? And that is the biggest decision you're going to be making, probably, for the most part. More so than removing, like, what character. It's usually relatively straightforward what character you want to remove, what character you want to snipe, stuff like that. Sometimes there is questions around that too. But that's the big thing for me of what makes a deck good. It's not just having those really strong raids, it's having the really strong support line behind it. And when you're evaluating what deck to invest in, or when you're evaluating these decks, like maybe you go on josephwriteranderson.com and you check out my prospective deck list, that's something to think about is, these raids look cool, but is the support line of characters there? Does it have the low cost draw? Does it have the 2 energy gen characters, raid targets? So those are all questions to ask yourself when you're trying to consider what deck you want to play from an upcoming set. This was an interesting question. Air Breather 5000 asks, are there any sets where it makes more sense to buy boxes over singles? So this was actually posted in my Discord for josephwriteranderson.com. And it was posted right around the same time I posted my questionnaire for this video. So I just included it because I thought it was an excellent question. And it is interesting because I've played a bunch of different TCGs by now. And I've approached how I buy products differently for each one. And I definitely have a way of approaching buying products in Union Arena that has evolved over time. So I personally do buy products. I don't think necessarily everyone should buy products. I think that there are a lot of reasons why buying singles makes sense. I think in general, if you want to go for the optimal financial move, buying singles, if you're speaking purely monetary value, buying singles is probably going to be the best bet. And that's a general rule in TCGs. However, there are caveats to that. For me, it makes sense to buy products because I want to test the decks right away. It's a huge, I want to get if I want a set, I want that set as soon as possible. There's no point in me waiting. That's time that I can't test the deck. That's time that I can't share my findings about a deck. So it's worth it to me to buy the products if I really want to build like multiple decks from a set. So for example, I can give 2 examples of this, of when I bought singles and when I bought products. Maybe 3 examples. One on the all in on products, one middle products and singles, and then one all singles. So for Sword Art Online Volume 2, I love Sword Art Online. It's my favorite anime. And I love the decks. They're strong decks. They're going to be very strong when they come out. And I'm really invested in that. So I want to, instead of buying a bunch of loose boxes, I went and bought a case from a local supplier that I know and trust. And I bought a case for a good price. And ultimately, that's going to be a better value for me. Even though it was expensive out front, I can then sell stuff I don't need online. I can give stuff away to my local players. I can build all the decks I want to build early. I don't have to wait. And it's just it's from an opportunity cost standpoint, time cost standpoint, and then what I can sell standpoint, it's the better value for me. Now, as a middle point, when I got into Kaiju, I was not super into Kaiju. I'm not even sure if I'd seen the show or not when I got my Kaiju deck. I might have. I love Kaiju, by the way. It's a great show. But when I got into Kaiju, there really was just one deck I wanted to build. I was interested in the others, but I really wanted to build Mina. And I'm glad I did because now Mina is my favorite deck. So for that, it was a mixture. My local store had some singles. And so I bought a lot of what I needed for the Minas from those singles. And then I went and bought a couple boxes to get the bulk I needed and to get a few more raids that I needed. So I bought like 2 boxes in addition to the singles. So that was a great middle of the road thing because I wanted stuff quickly. I wanted to test. And I also like to have a lot of extra cards lying around because you never know really what the ideal build is. I think if you get too locked into just literally buying the deck, like just piecemealing it, for example, go on TCG Player, which you can do. They're my partners, by the way. So whenever you buy something via one of my links, it helps me. I get a commission. So make sure to do that. If you're a fan of the show, click on one of my links before you buy on TCG Player. They're partners with me. But if you're going to go and do that, you're kind of locked into the deck you have to some extent. There's ways around that. It's not the end of the world. You can get products from going to tournaments and things like that. But when I deck build, I like to have a lot of cards around because I like to test out different kinds of things. I don't want to just build one version of the deck and that's it. I've gone through already, even though I was successful from the start with Mina, I won the first tournament with Mina I ever went to, and it was like a 12-player tournament. I still made tons of changes to Mina since then. And having the product, some product and some singles gave me the flexibility to do that. Now, a situation where I only bought singles is when Demon Slayer Volume 2 came out. And I love Demon Slayer, but I had already bought my case for Sword Art Online. So I'm already locked into Sword Art Online. I'm not going to go and buy a ton of products for Demon Slayer when it's a month before Sword Art Online comes out, Volume 2 comes out. So I didn't buy products for Demon Slayer Volume 2. But there was a deck I was interested in, which was the blue Demon Slayer deck. And my local shop had a bunch of singles. So I think, again, I'm lucky because I know a lot of shops don't do that. So I didn't have to wait for TCG Player to send them to me, right? But in that case, there really was just that one deck I really wanted to play. So I bought that one deck. And the trade-off is, I don't have a ton of extra cards lying around to customize. I did get some from my winnings. But that was a situation where buying a single deck definitely made sense. So I hope that giving you those three scenarios helps you. It's something I've thought a lot about because I'm very cost focused. I really like to keep costs down. I like to play TCGs without losing all my money to play TCGs, right? I think it's very important to play, especially for people, who are just playing for casually for fun, right? Like if it's just your hobby, you don't want to go broke playing TCGs. So definitely think through where you're at with those three scenarios. I think that's the right way to go. That's an excellent question. Let's move on to the next question. And this one, Chuck asks, when do you want to go second in Union Arena? And this is one I'm going to just straight up say I don't think there is a definitive right or wrong answer that you can apply across the board for when it's better to go first or when it's better to go second. And I also at the same time think it's relatively similar across the board. I don't think some games, like I remember back when I was covering Lorcana a lot, that was a game where going first statistically had a huge advantage to it. Statistically, you were just way more likely to win if you go first because of the way that game works. Union Arena has a much more solid check in place to keep it pretty similar between first and second. So it doesn't, I don't find from feel that there's going first, second has a massive impact on whether or not I win. That being said, I think going first pretty much across the board is the safer bet. So for me, the big thing is if I go first, it means that I'm more likely to be the first player to have that really big turn. So there are situations where going second, the player can, on turn 2, if they hit certain things, or they have a couple AP extends in their hand. I was going to say Bankai. AP extends in their hand. They can extend their turn and play all their cards out and raid up and hit you with damage too. That can happen on turn 2. Super aggro decks can hit you really hard by turn 2. Like Kenshin can, if they get what they need, they can have already hit you a bunch of times by the time they hit like 3 attacks by turn 2. So that's something to consider, but I find you're much more likely to get that big turn by turn 3. So by going first, you're the one who gets that turn first. So there's very few scenarios where I would say no to that. I think that there might be a scenario where if I'm playing against a deck that is like takes a lot of setup and I really want to rush them down, maybe in that scenario I might go second. But for the most part, I'm always picking first. Now, that being said, I do know a lot of very strong players who do have opinions about first or second, and they do often choose to go second. So I'm not saying they're wrong. I think that there is definitely a reason for that. It's a little bit, in my opinion, riskier to go second, but it can pay off big time. Like going second, for example, with my Mina Reno deck. If I go second and I'm raiding that Reno up on turn 2, which is kind of easy to do, and I'm hitting that Baco and I'm attacking for like 2 or 3 attacks, I guess it would be 2 attacks, then that's pretty nice, right? So, but it's riskier. It's kind of risky. It's less likely that I'm going to hit that on turn 2. So that's really up to you. I personally go first. I think it's a safer bet, but test it out. Think about it yourself. Now, this is a really interesting question from the Sauce Boss. And the Sauce Boss is really asking me 2 different questions here. And he's asking, what's your favorite deck that you know underperforms? So the answer I give Sauce Boss is, my favorite deck that underperforms is probably Code Geass Pizza. And Code Geass Pizza is a really fun deck to play. You do so much searching with that deck. You basically build your deck up the way you want to build it up because of how much you search through it. Your whole deck becomes a resource, really. It sort of feels like a Pokemon. Like Pokemon, how Pokemon, your whole deck is your resource. That's how Pizza feels. And there's just a lot of really fun mechanics in Pizza, and it got a lot of cool things in Volume 2 that made it more fun and more of its own deck. Like the 2-cost C2 or CC that gens 2 on the energy line if you have a couple Pizza. So that deck is super fun, and I wish that it was stronger. And I think that it really is just a couple cards away from being stronger. For example, if you're Lelouch, that 3-cost Lelouch, that's very vital to your deck strategy. If that Lelouch was a 2 energy gen character, that deck would be considerably better. If you could cut down the number of extra 2 gens, like in my build, I'm running the Colin because she can move up and attack. If I could just cut her out and run the C2, 4 of the C2, and then run that Lelouch at 4, and I didn't need any more energy gen, that would help a lot. If there was a stronger 1-cost, and I know there is one in Japan, like a C2 that lets you search for pizzas. If that deck had a stronger 1-cost, that would help the deck a lot. If it had better 0 costs, like I think the way it is now, you're sort of running like a generic 0 cost. So there's a lot of cards that could help that deck out. And I would really like it if that deck did get helped out, because it is one of my favorites. But it's just the way it is now, it's a little just too hard to play. And part of that is because you already have so much space being taken up by the pizza cards. It doesn't really hurt to run the delivery pizza, although the delivery pizza is without a trigger. So you got to factor that in. But running the 4 extra giant pizza, and you kind of have to, does hurt. So you already have 8 spots being taken up that you don't normally have taken up. And so you need some more consolidation in the utility of the cards in that deck. So that's my answer, Sauce Boss. Thanks for that awesome question. Artsy Fagardi asks, is Mina still your favorite deck? And how do you feel about it going forward with the coming SAO and Evangelion format? It's a great question. For me, I've already been testing it against some SAO Volume 2. And we all know if Evangelion's going to be big. Although I will preface this by saying Evangelion's looking less big than it did at first. When Evangelion first came out, I was just seeing all these feeds everywhere of Evangelion decks, right? I was talking to players involved in the Japanese meta, and they were just saying, Evangelion is going to destroy the world, right? And it didn't entirely. And I don't think that it will in the English meta. A couple of cards are most likely going to get cut from the Evangelion set. So let's just talk about SAO Volume 2. First, Mina does decently well. This has no problem with SAO Volume 2. SAO Volume 2 is not a huge issue for Mina. But Evangelion will change things a lot. So what my answer to this is I still think Mina is a really strong deck post Evangelion and SAO Volume 2, but I don't think a lot of other people are going to feel that way, if that makes sense. Like the play share of Mina is going to drop. So it already wasn't super high as high as it should have been. And I think with all the shiny new toys of SAO Volume 2 and Evangelion, Mina's play share is going to drop quite a bit. You're going to see Mina basically drop into the A tier range off of what it is right now. I consider S tier. Once those sets come out, Mina is going to drop down to A tier. So that doesn't mean that Mina's a bad deck or it can't win or can't compete. I just think it's going to drop down in popularity a lot. And it won't be as like dominant as it can be right now with how strong those sets are going to be. So, but back to the original question, is it still my favorite deck? Yes, right now, Mina is by far my favorite deck. I actually the last tournament I went to, I meant to play Mina and I brought Toshiro Kenpachi, and I love Toshiro Kenpachi, but the feeling of playing Mina is just so much more fun to me. It's just, you can do so much with it. So right now, Mina is my favorite. We'll see how I feel about that after SAO Volume 2 comes out. There's so many decks I'm looking forward to in that. But thanks again for that awesome question, Artsy Fagardi. Now Sam asks, how much play testing do you recommend till you would start modifying or tweaking a deck? So I think the question here, I remember there was some more context added to this from Sam, which was Sam was saying, I sometimes feel like I edit a deck. I'm paraphrasing here, Sam, but I sometimes feel like I edit a deck too quickly after testing it out. So that's kind of some more added context there. But for me, I think play testing is huge. I play test a lot. So I have a really robust play testing process I do on my own. It's a very disciplined process, so I try not to get too much bias when I'm playing. So I have a very disciplined approach to playtesting on my own. I playtest a ton with friends. Part of the reason why I go to so many tournaments isn't just because I like winning, but it's because I want to playtest a lot. So that's where, if I playtest on my own, it only gives me so much of a strong idea of how things are. And when I go to a tournament, I get a much stronger idea of whether or not the way I built the deck is doing what I want it to do, especially in the current playing field, and especially against other people. So sometimes when I play against myself, I know, for example, I will test a certain deck, but the problem I have is I'm testing optimally against that deck, right? So when I was practicing for the LA Regional, as an example, I was playing a ton against Red Kenshin into Goddesses, but I was approaching that as someone who knows how to play against Goddesses. But when I went to the Regional, most people didn't know how to play against Goddesses. So I think that it's really important to go and test, have a local scene that you're a part of, have friends that you like to play with and test with them a lot. You don't have to test all the time. I think going once or twice a week, I go to like 1 or 2 tournaments a week, depending on what's going on. And that's usually enough for me to get some good solid testing in and some good data. That doesn't really answer the question. I think the question is really more, how much play testing do you know? So one game is too little play testing for me. Like playing one game, you're not really going to know anything. You can get a feel. If you're testing something off the wall and you really are like, okay, that completely bricked me up, you might be able to get that feel from one. But I'd say about, at the very minimum, would be a best 2 out of 3 round. And really probably more like best 2 of those. When I was testing my pizza deck that I ended up winning this is when I was still pretty new to Union. When I won that first tournament I went to with pizza, I tested that deck obsessively, like over and over and over. So I think it's okay to make changes as you go, as long as you do it in like a strategic manner. So maybe you do a best 2 of 3 one way, make the change, do the best 2 or 3 another way, see how it feels. For example, keep the deck you play against the same. So you want to reduce the number of variables, right? So if you're going to be making a lot of changes, let's say you're playing against Lancelot as your test deck, and you're playing whatever deck you're playing, you make a change. Keep playing against Lancelot. That's going to give you a better idea of how the change that you made impacts things, right? That's just basic scientific method. Is you want to reduce the number of variables to test what it is that you're changing. So I hope that answers your question. And that's it. So that's all the questions that I wanted to go over today for the Joseph Ryder Anderson 2025 AMA series. Thanks so much for being a part of this journey this year. I did a lot of really cool things in 2025. And my favorite, one of my favorite things about 2025 has been growing the Union Arena side of JosephRiderAnderson.com. When I got into Union Arena, I didn't get into it necessarily to do what I ended up doing with it. I just really liked it. I'd already obviously been doing JosephRiderAnderson.com for years and been writing about a lot of different TCGs, and Union Arena just really sparked my interest. I was sitting at a shop and someone opened a pack, and they pulled that, like, the alt art Toshiro Hitsugai, and I loved Bleach, so I saw that and connected to that right away. And then I played the game, and the gameplay which just so spoke to me with how combat focused it was. The way you move things around the board really spoke to me. So I just loved Union Arena right away, and I saw its potential. And I'm really happy that the potential ended up being there at the level I thought it had. I think people vastly underestimate Union Arena. I think it's doing really, really well, and there's lots of signs of that. I think it has a fantastic community. And so it's been such an honor and a pleasure to grow Joseph Rider Anderson into being what essentially is the top blog for Union Arena in the English meta, or in the English world for the English version. Joseph Rider Anderson's the go-to blog for that. So, but that wouldn't be possible without you, without your questions like this, without your readership, without you listening to the podcast episodes, without you checking out the latest articles on the website. It literally would not be possible without you. So I want to thank you so much for being a part of this journey. In 2026, there's a lot going on. I already have a lot planned. I've already been thinking obsessively over what's going to happen from the content perspective for Joseph Rider Anderson 2026. So it's going to be a big year, and I hope that you stick with me through that. The best way to do that is to follow me on X, JosephRiderAnderson.com. You can find all the links to my socials. You can get involved in the Discord community. I hang out on Discord all the time. You can follow me on X again. You can join the newsletter. And just keep sending me questions. I always love hearing from my readers. I always love hearing what the kinds of things are that you're thinking about. So definitely get involved. Appreciate everything. And until next time, keep on battling. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Joseph Rider Anderson podcast.